Hi, thanks for checking out the channel. My name is Scott Spiers. I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist and clinical supervisor practicing in North Carolina. Uh, I also have about 9 years experience in methadone. In methadone treatment, I've been a certified counselor, actually an intern before certification. Then I got certified. I also practiced as a licensed addiction counselor in methadone. I became a clinical supervisor at a methadone clinic, eventually an area clinical supervisor, where I was associated with six different clinics. And then ultimately, I ended up being a program director at a methadone clinic, which really is what took me out of that part of the profession entirely. Also, for the record, I've practiced in three different states. And when I had all the clinics up together, it's roughly about 16 clinics. So I'm probably never going to mention specific clinics, specific states for a bunch of reasons. I have non disclosure agreements, I have a legal non disclosure agreement. Let's just say I have a whole bunch of experience in methadone. And ever since we started this channel, I've been wanting to lean more into methadone and do some content on what it's like to be at a methadone clinic, what a methadone clinic is, the really great, wonderful things about methadone and methadone clinics, and trust me, there are, and the not so good things about methadone clinics. Surprisingly, the New York Times beat me to the punch on this. They just released an article over the past couple days that I'm reading it and I'm going, huh, I probably should go ahead and start the methadone stuff. So I'm just going to start here because it's timely and it's relevant. The name of the article is Fraud and Fakery at the country's largest chain of methadone clinics. And then we have an unfortunate photograph. I really don't like that picture, but at least no publicly identifiable information is there. That does look like a typical methadone clinic nowadays. They used to look a little bit better. And this article singles out the largest methadone provider in the country, which is Acadia. And they say fraud and fakery at the country's largest chain of methadone clinics. Acadia Healthcare falsifies records at its methadone clinics and enrolls patients who aren't addicted to opioids, a Times investigation found. I got to hand it to Katie Thomas and Jessica Silver Greenberg for taking this on. It is a big issue, and I do have a lot to say about it. But overall, in this article, Acadia is being singled out. And I have mixed feelings about that. I've never worked with Acadia. I've never been associated with Acadia. But man, a lot of the people that I've worked with over the years were either counselors at Acadia or they were managers at Acadia. And just through sheer hearsay, everything I've heard about Acadia backs at least most of this article up. Although I want to point out it's not necessarily fair to Acadia. They did respond, and we'll do a couple things. We'll get there. But by and large, the accusations in this article are pretty severe. One of the biggest charges levied against Acadia, and if I'm perfectly honest, every single huge methadone clinic in the country. Maybe I should touch on this. Methadone clinics, they vary from city to city, from state to state. In fact, if you get a new program director into your facility, that will change the culture overnight. So, as highly regulated as methadone is, uh, there are some similarities and commonalities, but each methadone clinic can be a little bit different. So, one of the one of the errors, I think, in this article, and hopefully it's just a test article to see if people read it, but I think it would have been a lot more fair to compare Acadia to other major players within the system. Someday I'll give you a presentation on those players, I think, but for right now, I think it is radically unfair in a lot of ways that Acadia was singled out. But again, this could be a seed article, and if there's enough response, if they get enough traction, hopefully they'll open it up. One of the first things that they mentioned here that caught my eye was sometimes a counseling session recorded in the patient's medical chart is simply a chance encounter. For example, medical records for a patient in Iowa show she had a 40-minute counseling session in December 2023, but the patient said in an interview that it was actually a hallway chat that lasted less than 5 minutes. Acadia's business is built on volume. Its counselors carry caseloads that are sometimes more than double the limit set by the state. Give me a hell yeah. According to employees and inspection records, with so many patients, the clinics can become assembly lines, offering little more than a cup of methadone. I can attest to that, probably across all 3 states that I've worked methadone at. And not all of the clinics, I'd say that 2 of the clinics didn't really have this particular issue, but the other 14 absolutely did. Again, my problem with this in the article is there's a lot of nuance to that. There are a lot of reasons why these things would happen. And I kind of feel like they're singling out, one particular person, one particular session. I've been there. I've had to testify at a court hearing over this very thing. I can tell you the shortcut is the counselor accused of this fraud was found not guilty. They had a little slap on the wrist on the board, but the company's documentation system was so bad. Like even the timers, right? You have a timestamp for when the note happens, and then you have video, that you want to use for corroborating evidence. They were like 7 hours apart. All that evidence was taken out. So I think it is slightly unfair that I think if you're going to bring this up, I think a more thorough investigation needs to happen, probably with all of the methadone companies and probably more than just a single clinic in Iowa. Clinic directors can get bonuses when their patient enrollment goes up, an incentive that has led Acadia to treat people who do not have opioid addictions but are dependent on other drugs. It moves on to point out that people who are not addicted to opioids can get high from methadone. Yes, that happens. But as far as the bonus structure go, again, um, I feel a little bit like one of those mafia dudes who's on YouTube telling stories about the mafia, and that you're always afraid that you're going to get whacked. I can attest to this. As a clinical supervisor and as a program director, my bonus was directly tied to the percentage of spaces we had available versus how many clients were in there. We also had bonuses directly tied to percentage growth quarter after quarter. I'd say more than half of my time as a clinical director was dealing with that. So, does this happen in Acadia? I'm pretty sure it does. Does this happen in other clinics? Oh, hell yeah. And if you're a patient or if you're a counselor at a methadone clinic, I'd be really interested in your response to that. So, a little background into Acadia. They bought their clinics about 10 years ago from Bain Capital, which that's a whole nother story. Why is Bain Capital a private equity firm owning methadone clinics, and who exactly was Acadia? It doesn't really go into that. According to this, in 2020 also, and this is a huge deal, and one of the biggest parts, one of the biggest reasons I love methadone is the federal government required that Medicaid and Medicare cover treatment, roughly all 2,100 clinics. And for those who think that Medicare for all or Medicaid for all is a good idea, I can tell you nothing created more of a nightmare, nothing created more of an administrative questionability than Medicaid and Medicare funding. That's a whole different thing. But it is a tremendous amount of money, in which case a single clinic, depending on their population, can bring in $3 million in revenue. And with the opioid crisis, the settlements that are coming in there, it's probably going to get bigger. And these companies, which are for profit, they're trying to get a chunk of that $50 billion settlement. So why is all of this happening in methadone? It's money. One thing that has Acadia and a whole bunch of other clinics kind of worried is there is a bipartisan bill, and I'm disappointed New York Times doesn't have this in there, that would allow patients to avoid methadone clinics entirely, get it prescribed by a private prescriber, and pick up their methadone at a pharmacy, which it is probably going to put all of these companies out of business. So they are fighting. New York Times mentions that Acadia and other companies have sought to derail the legislation by arguing that providing methadone without counseling could lead to more overdose deaths. That's true. In a letter to this year to the bill's sponsors, Acadia wrote that its suite of services was the gold standard and provided individualized care. And I'm adding methadone has definitely jumped the shark. Dozens of counselors with Acadia told the New York Times that some of those counselors might be responsible for up to 120 patients at a time, which is insane. And I have seen it happen time and time and time again. Take North Carolina, for instance. The ceiling for how many patients you can have on a caseload is supposed to be 50. However, methadone, and they don't go into this, is so egregiously underpaid. Like, this is no joke. We had our annual rollout of salaries and comparisons, and a bag checkout person at a local grocery store would make more money per hour than a fully licensed counselor. A licensed counselor has a master's degree. They've gone through at least 2 to 3 years of another internship on top of everything else out. The pay was egregious. It is egregious. Methadone has brought this all on themselves. So ever since I started methadone, again, 2 clinics in my career that didn't do this, but methadone generally keeps things understaffed, keeps keeps the counselors seeing anywhere from 60 to 75. At one point, as a program director, I'm the one doing this, I had a counselor in that facility that had 100 patients because nobody in their right mind is going to work at a methadone clinic. And I'll do another video soon about what it's like to work at a methadone clinic. It's completely insane. I kept petitioning to stop intakes. My company did, once or twice. We'd have for like a month, and then I'd have to have a business plan how I'm going to open things up. But the bottom line is we had, I think at the time we had 4 counselors for 300 patients, and they were overworked. And the state opioid treatment authority and our administrative, the executives forced us to continue doing intakes. So I can attest to that one. That is something that absolutely happens. So anyway, I really recommend, I've got the link down below to the New York Times article. If you're interested in methadone and all the things going on in methadone, please check it out. Please like and subscribe. Stay here because I am going to go more deeply into methadone. But before I go, here's my closing thing. Here's the biggest problem I have with this article is they're singling Acadia out for all these things. Methadone falls under the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is SAMHSA, which is federal. They fall under the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, when it comes to methadone. They fall under state opioid treatment authorities, which oversee the each state can have their own laws, so they have that administrative branch. And on top of that, you have an organization called CARF, which I should look that up for you. What does that stand for? So CARF is an accrediting body. So what I mean by that is all of these clinics, everything that every Acadia clinic has to undergo what's called CARF accreditation. Now, CARF stands for the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities. And every year they have their manual, which is full of an insane amount of material that you have to go through. So CARF you can fail CARF, you can get a 1-year accreditation, which means you had some minor issues, so they're going to come back next year and check you out. You have the 2-year accreditation, which means really super minor stuff, but we trust you, so we'll come back in 2 years. And then you have the coveted 3-year accreditation. Every single clinic I worked with the exception of one, got a 3-year accreditation. All the clinics I worked at that were chronically understaffed, they had fraudulent case notes. There were every single one of them. It happened right under the nose of CARF. And so my issue with this is the people who are supposed to be regulating and monitoring methadone clinics have completely fallen asleep on the job and turned the other way, with the exception of the DEA. Those guys don't play. That they come in, you have no idea when they are coming in, and boom, they audit your stuff. Medicaid, same thing. Medicaid can come in unannounced. But everybody else, from the state treatment authority, the state opioid treatment authority to CARF, they plan it in advance. Okay? And with CARF, you get to cherry pick your charts. Every single clinic, CARF will deny this, every single clinic I ever worked with, we chose the charts. And we'd have a list. We want to have 2 or 3 pregnant clients. We want to have some with co-occurring disorders. We get these charts months in advance, right? And then we start cleaning up and making sure we had everything in there. And then boom, we go through our 2-day ordeal, and lo and behold, magically, right, we get the 3-year accreditation. I'm willing to bet anything that if the New York Times really wants to dig into this, check out the accreditation records for each one of these clinics. And I will be completely surprised if 90% of them don't have a 3-year accreditation from CARF, and they've been signed off by the state opioid treatment authority. So I think it's a little unfair to single Acadia out on this, the whole business, the whole thing, and for a variety of reasons. So anyway, methadone, it is potentially full of fraud and deceit and of falsifying of records. And by the way, another thing I want to mention, I have never seen somebody addicted to like alcohol, marijuana, anything, be assessed and put on the methadone. That's one thing I haven't seen. I'm not saying that it has never happened. It's one thing I haven't seen. What I have seen are people who were misusing opioids for like 2 or 3 months. I have seen medical directors bring them in, which again is a whole nother issue. So I hope you like this. This is just a start. If you're a patient at a methadone clinic, please let us know in the comments if this is your experience. And more importantly, if you're one of the true heroes of addiction treatment, if you're one of the thousands of people who are a methadone counselor, who got the job for all the right reasons, who wanted to get in there in the front lines on the war against drugs, on the opioid crisis. If you've worked at a methadone clinic, I really want to hear from you. I really, really want to hear from you because I think it's time that methadone counselors be shown the respect that they deserve. It be brought up more what it is they do. And if you are a methadone counselor who's experiencing any of this stuff, I have one word for you that I believe might actually solve a good part of your problems. And that word is union.